And we are live. I am with the illustrious, the famous, the amazing, the law nerd extraordinaire herself, Emily D. Baker. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm so good to be here. I don't know about famous. I mean, maybe YouTube famous, like the YouTube lawyer herself, Emily D. Baker.
Yeah, you've got to be. You're definitely on the rise right now. It's like I've got to grab a hold of you while you're still within kind of range before you blow completely up.
I mean, it's been a really interesting experience. And those that have been watching this since like literally just October, who kind of found my channel as we were pushing towards 5,000 subscribers at the very end of October, were like, what happened in November? I'm like, I don't know. We gained like 60,000 some odd subs in November and then have kept going from there. So we're rounding down to 100. I'm going to dye my hair purple. I'm very excited about all of it.
All right. Well, if my pattern holds, I have a habit of getting people, and then within a very short period, they're hitting 100,000. So
perfect.
Well, Viva Fry, I had him on, and then he hit 100,000. He's at 340 something now.
Wow.
And let me see, Nick, I had him on, and he was at 100,000 the next week. He's at 140. He's blowing up. So, and the way you're moving, I wouldn't be surprised. And the beautiful thing is, it's a timing thing, and I'll just take 100% credit for it.
Perfect. I love that. I love that for you. No, it's been really fun because I think the topical content has really allowed people to find the channel through the things they're interested in. But what I found is people have definitely stayed for the law nerds and for the community and for each other. And connection's really hard right now. So that's been the most special thing for me. I've been like, yes, we have, like, it feels like getting to hang out with friends. And that is the thing I love the most. And it's why I never considered myself a live streamer, but I live for it. Like now sitting down to record a video, I'm like, we're going to record. It's going to be okay. Like I enjoy streaming so much and seeing the audience that it's just different.
Well, do you have trouble with it? I mean, I don't like having anything scripted or outlined or whatever. I just riff. And you and I both are podcasters first. So this is kind of a fun deal. We're also major Apple fan people. And yes, I even have the AirPods Max. But
I want the AirPods Max, and I've been trying to restrain myself. But
okay, they're the best sounding headphones I've ever heard, but I don't know that they're that best sounding I've ever heard. So it's kind of in that whole realm, if you will.
That's how I felt about the HomePod, because the HomePod is glorious. It's glorious, the sound on it. But then it's like, does it really matter? I love it because I can move it inside and outside. And so when we're out on the deck, the AirPod sounds, HomePod. I've named 4 things. Sorry, y'all. The HomePod sounds amazing.
No, that's cool. And I was thinking about with the podcast. Now you were doing solo episodes on that, right? It's pretty cool.
I do. I started it a year ago in November as the Get Legit Law and Shit podcast. It was really started as a resource for entrepreneurs because I do a lot of entrepreneurial consulting. And then as topical news stuff came up, a lot of people are like, well, what's your opinion on this? And so much happened over the summer where I found a criminal prosecutor perspective helpful to be like, look, this is how we're feeling about a thing. This is what the law says about a thing. This is what my experience tells us about a thing. Let's talk through what's happening, because I find that people can make better change when they're empowered with understanding. And it's like, here's the understanding so you can see what you agree with or disagree with, versus a lot of emotional reaction, because everybody can throw emotion out there. Bringing facts is a different skill set. And I found that juries related to that well with me. Bringing facts and story and a bit of humor helped people understand the cases I was presenting. So the podcast kind of morphed into news commentary and pop culture commentary. And once it shifted from the entrepreneurial category to the news commentary category, it took off. And then as the YouTube channel grew, the podcast has grown, and it trends almost every week worldwide in news commentary, which is wild to me. I'm like, there's not a lot of lady faces when you scroll through the news commentary section on Apple. So I think the positioning of it helped, because if you scroll, and I changed it to the Emily Show, you see my face on there now. It's really much more of a personal kind of breakdown, deep dive. But I don't script those out, but I do plan them out when I'm talking about cases, so I don't tangent too much.
Okay, well, and that's cool. And I know you talk a lot about dyslexia and ADD. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at my channel, but I have a
Yeah.
lot of behavioral experts on, especially
Which I
body language
love.
readers and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a very high percentage of people in the body language world who have both ADD or dyslexia or both. I don't know
That's so
if you knew that.
interesting. I didn't know that. It's
It really
interesting.
makes sense if you think about it. And I think it's difficulty with written word and having to perceive everything around you. One of the most famous people as a lawyer, David Boies, whatever, the guy who took down Microsoft, is
Yeah.
definitely dyslexic, if I recall. And that's always helped him across examinations and anything in the court because you guys memorize everything around you. So body language, it makes sense if you think about it because you're always baselining the world, and anything that ticks off of it is going to set you off.
Yeah, that makes a tremendous amount of sense to me. And then my experience in court was being able to really retain things I heard. So contemporaneously cross-examining a witness, actually hearing what they're saying, processing what they're saying, asking the next right question, and then also processing how the jury's reacting to it. None of that's written. All of that is like verbal and observational skills. And so it's part of why I went into criminal law, is because I wanted to do the talkie-talkie and not law and motion and typing out briefs. That kind of stuff was boring. It was just boring. I enjoyed the stories of them. As a law clerk, I worked for two civil judges writing opinions and helping them brief cases. And there were some really interesting fact patterns. I mean, I learned that you can't have an employment action on a cruise ship under the laws in the state where they were hired because cruise ships are flagged under the Bahamas. And so the employment laws of the Bahamas I was like, why do I need to know this? But I know a lot about it. But once I could get into court and do like TV show type law, it was way, way more fun because I got to make my arguments on my feet.
Which is a really cool skill. And I wanted to always ask this, since you were a prosecutor, everybody grows up looking at Perry Mason. They don't have many prosecutor shows. But as I grew up, I was considering, do I want to be a lawyer? And if I was going to be a lawyer, I want to serve justice. And what if people are innocent? And I came to a realization that possibly the people who can dispense justice best are the prosecutor because they can always turn down a case.
Yes, absolutely. And I turned down a lot of cases. I took on cases that I fought to have reduced or dismissed because I thought that the results were unjust. There were cases I fought to reduce when the victims' families were literally outside the courthouse protesting against what I had chosen to do in cases. And that's not easy either because a lot of prosecutors go into prosecution to speak for the victim, but the victim's not your client. The victim is another party that the thing happened to, but you represent the best interest of the people of the state, the people of the county. So you don't represent a client. You don't represent a victim. So sometimes you do things in cases that are against the wishes of the victim because that's what justice demands. And that's a very interesting position to be in because then everyone in the case just hates you. The victims are mad at you. Oftentimes the defendants are still mad at you. And you're like,
mad at you.
This is the cops are mad at you. It's like, this is what we have to do. But in the cases that I dismissed, I always explained to the officers why. In the cases that I fought for and the very few that I lost, I always was like, yeah, that's a fair result. I can see why the jury would go that way. That's why some of these things just have to go to trial. And then in the things I fought to reduce, I really felt that it was the right thing to do, even when victims' families were upset.
Well, cool. So let's jump back to the beginning because I
Sure.
really love your TED Talk, and I want to go into that a little bit. But
Absolutely.
You were on the AllMale water polo team. Save Yourself.
Yes,
Why?
I was.
With that?
There were.
Was there no team?
There was no women's team. And there was my freshman year, there was one other woman, girl. I mean, we were in high school, we were girls. And then my junior year, there was one other girl. Nobody played all 4 years like I did. There were a few other girls in the division. And then there was one other girl in Southern California, Brenda Villa, who went on to be a multi-Olympian, played at Stanford, coached all the things. She was way better than I was. She was shorter than I was too, which was always so frustrating. I'm like, why? How are you so good? We are short. But my high school didn't have a women's water polo team. It was the early 90s. The women's water polo team, because I played, gained so much interest that the year I graduated, the next year they started a women's team because now there was enough interest. Because now the men's team was getting flooded with girls who wanted to play because I was playing. I had done competitive club swimming, and all the guys I was friends with were like, "Oh, we're trying out for water polo." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds amazing." And so I showed up for water polo tryouts, and the coach, who was at my wedding, was just like,
cool.
"What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "It's water polo tryouts, right?" And he's like, and I'm like, "Is there another team?" And he's like, "No." And I didn't really understand Title IX. My dad was an educator. He understood. And so my dad's like, "Well, there's not really much they can do. Are you sure you want to do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is great." And my freshman and sophomore year, I was 5'6". It was okay. Somewhere between sophomore and junior year, all the guys who were 5'6", 5'7" were like 6'1", 6'2". And I was like, what happened? What did you all do? I'm still 5'6".
Yeah, that's the big turn, because I mean, nobody seems to remember back, but essentially girls kick guys' butts up until high school.
Yep.
I mean, quite literally,
Yep.
because the growth spurt doesn't hit in, and usually the guys are a little bit more wheedly.
Yeah, I was definitely faster, and was able to keep up better my freshman and sophomore year. Junior and senior year, it got a little more difficult, because at the end of the day, a 17-year-old girl competing against 17-year-old boys becomes a much more difficult situation. When I graduated, I went to college and played on a women's team. Most of the women I played with in college had played coming up on men's teams. So the style of play in women's water polo now is very different than it was in the 90s. But most of us played coming from a men's team and trying to outdo strength that way instead of strategy. The game's changed since then. But my brother went on to be a national champion water polo player at like 6'5". So I kind of got, hosed on that. But now I get to be, YouTube's favorite lawyer. So it all works out.
I was looking at the chat. Your crew is here, which is awesome, and we'll have to definitely talk about that. The whole law nerds.
Yes,
I think you've created a movement. That's awesome, and I don't mind the cursey words. You want to explain cursey words, because I think it's hilarious.
I do. It like a lot of the weird shit that I say, it started organically. In that I know people listen to my podcast or listen to the things I do, and I curse quite a lot. It is I'm an adult and I like to say the cursey words, but this has been since I was a DA, because oftentimes a cop will come into your office and he's like, "I've got some shit." And you're like, "Well, what the fuck are you bringing me today?" So it becomes the vernacular, and then you have to context switch when you're in court to not curse. And then occasionally you get to curse in court, and it's like getting to curse in front of your teacher. So you look at the witness and you're like, "So did you really say die, motherfucker? Is that what was heard?" And you're just
no, hold on. Do you do it with inflection though? That
yes.
would be my question, because
yes.
I mean, I guess it would depend on the judge, but it would be like, do you say it flatly, like,
"Nope,
a witness said"?
Nope.
Put
all of the inflection. I actually almost got fined by a judge for making a jury laugh, and he looked at me and he goes, "Miss Baker, if this jury laughs one more time," and it was during jury selection, which is a little less formal, and everybody's tense, and the case was tense, and my face does things when I talk, and the jury had laughed at my face doing something, and the judge was like, "Miss Baker, if you make this jury laugh one more time, you need to go and get your checkbook and come back here. I'm going to fine you $2,500. And then if you get fined for discipline at that amount, you have to report yourself to the state bar." And I was like, "Your Honor," he goes, "I am the only one that will be funny in this courtroom, Miss Baker." And I was like, my apologies, Your Honor. I did not mean to step on your comedy bit. I'm just trying to get through this very long day of jury selection with all these people in a very hot courtroom that haven't had lunch yet." But yes, I would definitely say it with inflection. And then as I was reminding people I say the cursey words, it just kind of happened. Like, I say the cursey words as a way to let people know this is, because I curse just sounds harsher. I mean, the way I curse is cursey words. And so it just came about kind of organically. The first time I disclosed the name of my podcast before I shifted it to the Emily Show, I was on stage at a conference in London, and the Brits don't curse in public, I get a sense, as much as Americans do. So my friend Chris Ducker was like, "Tell them the name of your podcast." I'm like, "Get Legit Law and Shit." And people were like, I'm like, "No, but that's what the fuck it is." And people are like,
yet they dropped a C word like crazy.
Truth.
It's
Truth.
like,
yep, there's a different balance. Anyway, so that's how the cursey words came about. And I remind people on the podcast that I say that because, again, if you want to engage with my content, headphones are advisable. And then when COPA happened on YouTube, I was like, oh, my cursing actually works to my favor on YouTube. It's clearly not content made for kids.
Oh, good call. I didn't even think about that. Now, I also have to tell the chat, Nightbot, I'm working on it. I don't have moderators, so I have a robot, and I have fights with Nightbot, and so does half of my audience. But Nightbot does not like all caps, and even friends will put it in there, and I don't know how to control Nightbot. It's almost becoming a joke now. Emily has Nightbot, but you seem to have Nightbot tamed. I guess that's a higher level.
I don't use Nightbot to moderate. I only use it to put in information because my mod squad has been super helpful. I had a video kind of blow up as it was premiering live. And then I went live and there were like 3,000 or 4,000 people on live. And a few people I knew were like, throw me a wrench. I've got you. I can help. And since I talk about stuff topically, the law nerds are generally not an issue, but people will come in because of the topic and aren't really with our chat culture. And so that can become a thing.
That makes total sense. Question on that. I was just thinking back to your being on the AllMale team and then even in the DA's office. Was that helpful to you being on the AllMale team, kind of getting in the vernacular to talk more comfortably with cops and things like that?
I mean, it's hard to know if it helped because it was my experience. There were quite a lot of district attorneys that had a sports and athletic background. I don't think that's by chance. I think the people who are drawn to that profession and that side of that profession tend to run competitive, have a pretty strong sense of the rules, people who you would expect. So college athletes from football to softball to volleyball, other water polo players, a lot of people who were on either debate team or Model UN in high school and college. So it was a lot of people who had some common ground, and it made it easier to shortcut those conversations. And you also build a foundation of trust working with a team, which is very similar to law enforcement. And so I was always comfortable. I don't say always. There were definitely times when it wasn't comfortable being the only woman in the room, but most of the time I was very comfortable in those spaces. And as I grew in my career and as times changed, it was easier to be like, bro, that's way sexist. Tone it back. Because I rather tell my friends like, hey, chill. So as you came up in the ranks and got to know people, you could definitely tell when they were joking or when it was inappropriate. I've shared stories on my channel about defense attorneys who were completely inappropriate. It didn't happen very often with police officers because they know, like, you're the district attorney, we have to work together. It was only awkward once when a guy I dated in high school was the officer on my case, and he walks in and we're both like, wait. He's like, wait, you're a DA? I'm like, you're a cop? Like, hi. But then because we had this previous relationship, I was like, Your Honor, just so you know, we're friends from high school. No idea he was an officer. Didn't even realize it's a very common name. Didn't realize on the report. And then the judge made fun of me, just took the piss out of me about it for the entire day.
So he's the one judge that has a sense of humor.
There were some. I mean, there were some that definitely had a good sense of humor and some that didn't. It just depends. It depends on the judge. And when you have a friendly relationship with them, they definitely can be a little bantery, which is fun. Some of them are very cranky and they all diet right after the holidays. So like February and March is the worst because all the judges were on diets. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Stop it. Just eat lunch. You're miserable in the afternoon.
Well, have you read the studies on that?
No.
That you need to have your case seen in the morning if you want to win. I mean, there's actual psychology studies and sociology studies, whatever it would fall under. But no, it's legit. It's like when there's multiple. From
my experience, it's legit.
Yeah,
you don't want to
after lunch. They're really tired. Before lunch, they want to go to lunch.
Yep.
And yeah, if you can be seen first thing in the morning, you have your absolute best odds of actually being exonerated or getting off or whatever. And I guess it's especially true when it's short things like, I guess, DUIs don't take that long or different multi things in the day.
Yep.
So everybody's having fun with Nightbot. That's too funny.
Thank you, law nerds, for being patient with Nightbot.
And patient with me. Thank you very much. I'll eventually work it out. I'll have a big enough channel where I have moderators
You have a big enough channel to have moderators.
someday. No.
You do.
Another thing I was thinking about is both in team sports, etc. There's a lot of ball busting, and you know how you said you can tell, okay, if I'm being teased, I'm not teasing.
Mhm.
And I've gotten the feeling like from lawyers, and I'm not a lawyer, but I love talking to all these damn lawyers. It's like I know more lawyers than anybody else, probably more lawyers than the lawyers on YouTube know. And it's weird.
Probably true.
But you guys, maybe not all of you, but many of you have the ability to debate and go at each other and be combative for fun. It's not,
Yeah.
and you walk away, you know, you're having a good time and you're like, ooh, damn, that was a good argument. What am I going to do with that? And like Nick, I know you've been on his show, and
Yep.
Nate's a delight. I've had Nate on with actually Nate and Viva are on this Friday.
Oh, fantastic.
Plug for everybody. But yeah, I had both of them on, and they debated the Supreme Court, the Texas ruling, and it got heated, really heated. But I mean, everybody's laughing afterwards. So
Yeah.
I was thinking that sometimes sports and things like that can kind of help prepare you for that type of environment.
I think so. And I think from my experience as a woman-in-law, there was definitely times where you have to tell if you're being teased and decide if you're okay with it or not okay with it. Decide when you have to put your foot down and decide when you talk to somebody privately about something that might have crossed a personal line. In sports, our team joked because we had like one of everything. We had one guy who was Hispanic, one guy who was Black, one guy who was Jewish, one girl. Like we had one kid who was Mormon. It was like one, 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 one. So we all had our own little jokes. Also, the 90s, when jokes based on stereotypes were literally the thing. And there was this really friendly banner with the seniors on our team. And there was a lot of that in law. I find that when you are a lawyer, there's some common ground to have those friendly debates. There's definitely lawyers that do not have friendly debates, and it is like win at all costs. They're generally not the people you'd want to have a beer with. If you'd want to sit down and have a drink with somebody and have a fun chat, you know that you can have that banter. And then I relate it to playing hoops with friends. Yeah, it's fun if you win, but if you don't, you still had a good time hanging out with your friends. And that's where that is. And it's like law school. Law school uses the Socratic method. You get put on the spot. It's highlighted in Legally Blonde, but you get put on the spot and asked questions about cases. And if you take that personally, you're not going to enjoy law school at all. If you take it as an intellectual challenge or you know, verbal judo, you have a lot more fun with it. And it's sport. And that's what a lot of law is. I've found that in the criminal arena, that was much more true. People knew when they could joke with each other and have fun. People knew when the cases were too serious to allow for that, but we still got along. You could have lunch with defense attorneys. Civil law, because the attorneys tend to not run into each other for multiple cases, civil law can go for the jugular. And in some of the cases I'm covering right now, we're seeing that with lawyers just going after each other.
Well, and maybe it's I don't know if it's a good way to put it, but in criminal law, especially if it gets really dark, there's gallows humor that's going to start coming out. And there's actually another term, and civil law may match it. Let me look up Nate because I always forget the quote. Essentially, it's a Sayers law. I don't know if you've heard of Sayers law for academics. And it's essentially that academic politics is the most vicious and bitter form of politics because the stakes are so low.
Interesting.
And
I mean, that's where that comes with civil law. It's just at the end of the day with civil law, you're fighting most of the time for the interests of a company or money. I mean, some cases not so much when we get into like toxic torts and people injured in plane crashes and stuff like that. But most civil law, at the end of the day, someone's going to get some money, someone's not going to get some money. A judge is going to say you were right, you were wrong, and everybody walks away. In criminal law, it's deeper than that. So things can get contentious, but if the attorneys can get along, it takes a little bit of the nastiness out of it because you can disagree and go hard for your client or your side without being nasty.
Well, and you're bridging that gap though, because YouTube drama and law seems to fit Sayers law completely.
It does. It does. It does absolutely fit that description. That's exactly what it is.
So I actually looked that up because of Nate the lawyer, Nate Brody, and
I enjoy Nate.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
Totally fun. And he kind of is tangentially tied with the same people you're sort of stuck
It's
with
how we
working.
connected. And I've been very appreciative of the community because when I started covering the Toddy Westbrook case against her business partner, I covered it because I was interested in Toddy Westbrook. I had followed the Dramageddons. I watched YouTube commentary channels. I enjoy the community because I find on the whole the community is a lot of fun. And so when I covered that case and it started growing and then everything grew, I was like, oh, and then I started making connections with others in the community, and it's been very welcoming. I've always loved YouTube. I did a Wine Wednesday show on a tech YouTuber's channel, Easy Computer Solutions, for God, a year plus. And so I really enjoyed tech YouTube before I left the DA's office, before the TED Talk. And because I couldn't talk law stuff because I was already my law brain was spoken for with the County of Los Angeles. So you cannot do anything law related on the side. So I did tech stuff and really enjoyed that community on Facebook and found so much support there that I really enjoyed finding that in the commentary community over the Toddy Westbrook cases. And then in the kind of reality TV community over the Girardi cases. So as I talk more topics, it's fun to get to know the other little pockets of YouTube. It's been fun.
It's funny because your path isn't dissimilar to Aviva Fry. David was pretty much a YouTuber. He would license out videos. His first video that put him on the map is he put I think it was almond butter on a GoPro and a squirrel took it up a tree.
I've seen that video.
I mean, everybody has. He's actually licensed to National Geographic. He won an award with
Perfect.
GoPro, all kinds of stuff. And if you've ever watched him, he is an amazing, adventurous person. So he'll be out with his kids lighting methane underneath the lake because there's fire. I mean, he's just that way. Or he's doing a video and fishing live while he's at it, or catching a fish by the time he whistles "Oh Canada." Just
That's
a fun dude. But he's also a classically trained pianist. But he wasn't getting the traction. I mean, he got his channel up to 10,000, whatever, and then he just started to react to things that were legally oriented because he's a lawyer too. And ultimately those started to catch, and now he literally does law reactions pretty much full time. So I think it's kind of interesting, your path on that. Now, is your YouTube blowing up beyond your podcast at this point?
Yes, absolutely.
And that brings in almost some conflict, doesn't it?
Well, YouTube is pulling up the podcast. So on Wednesdays, I put up a video and audio version of the podcast. So Wednesday, there's always both. And those, I really put the Emily show on a kind of structured dive into a particular case. And then my live streams tend to be updates on cases or Q&As with the community, things, fast reacts, lawyer reacts, things like that. So I don't think it's in conflict. The podcast had shifted into the legal commentary space before the channel started taking off, but the channel is definitely pulling the podcast up. But the podcast is accessible for different types of media. So it's opened a lot of doors in more traditional media. And then the YouTube videos on even the podcast episodes rank so well on Google that it really just pulls everything with it, because the podcast episode won't rank on Google for a search term, but the YouTube video absolutely will. So it's been very interesting to watch.
Conflict, I meant time conflict, because I can see already that you're straining at the edges, because you're being pulled every direction. You need to make hay while the sun's shining, so to speak. So you're riding a wave, and congrats, it's awesome.
Thank you.
But that can also pull away from the traditional thing. So it's like, the podcast, you work it for a while, it's like, wait a minute, the YouTube thing is just blowing up. So I think it's cool that you're doing both, but I notice you are doing both at the same time. So the podcast is kind of, well, we'll just cut the audio off of this and put it in the feed.
Yeah, I do record them. I had been asked to do a video version of the podcast for probably 6 months. And I was like, no, I record my podcast at midnight with my hair back in a hoodie. And it's just me and my microphone and the lights down. And it's easy to do. But it grew so much when I started doing a video version that I can't deny the fact that so many more people have found it because there's a video version, and the people who like the audio version still like the audio version and it's growing, but a lot of people want to have it up on YouTube, and the episodes on YouTube have done so much better. And it's, since I'm in front of my setup so much now anyway, it just added in, and it gives me a good place to anchor all the content for the week around, knowing that there's this deep dive episode coming every week, and what we're talking about or what we're updating. It kind of anchors the weeks of content around a topic. And it's, people know, like, when we do lives, it's going to be a little more fun, a little less structured, but those structured videos, some topics I can't do live. Like talking about the Capitol insurrection is not a topic I can do live and keep my thoughts in order. But other things are easier to be like, oh, there's this new filing, let's update it. And if you want the backstory, it's on the podcast episode.
Do you avoid some topics live? I mean, some things like, when you said that the Capitals, I'm just kind of like, oh God.
Yep. There's definitely things I avoid live. My whole purpose of my channel and of my content is to bring compassionate conversation, an understanding of law, and really good conversations. Some things, if I don't think we can have a good conversation around a topic, it might not be the right topic for a live. And that's why I did that as a podcast episode, because you can either listen to the whole thing or not. That's fine. But there are still people arguing in the comments over politics, but the law nerds don't do that. It's people who come in topically for a thing and are like, "Rah!" And the law nerds are like, yeah, you're not one of us. Just, this is fuckery. Just go. And I don't want to bring that into my live streams, because that's not the point of the streams. They're for fun. And when we started doing the court of public opinion 2 weeks ago, that's when we really started seeing the fun debates. So I'm bringing the law nerd community to the way lawyers have this verbal judo around topics that are easy to debate. Like, is a hot dog a sandwich? There's
levity. You bring a definite levity, and that's cool. I mean, that was actually my goal with the podcast initially. I mean, I have a face for radio, so I'm not sure why I'm doing okay on YouTube, but my goal was to have an idea pub, if you will, where I would meet somebody and I'd be like, wait a minute, you're what? You're an FBI agent, CIA, whatever, and just be sitting down and literally having a beer, which I like very much. A lot of.
You get to have a chat.
Yeah, and literally everybody would be, kind of listen in or whatever. And I kind of feel like live streams almost serve that. What's fun is I'm looking at the live stream here. There's not a lot jumping in for us. Everybody's talking to each other, which is very cool.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
That. Okay, somebody said my gain is off. Is this any better?
I love that they notice. I think you look great. I mean, but I'm also distracted by Grogu and R2D2 behind you. So
my wife painted that for my birthday.
It's fantastic. I mean, obviously you can see my like Pokemon toys in my background. I'm a giant nerd as well. So, and a Star Wars nerd too.
Okay. Well, Rick, is this better? You said I was about 40%. Okay, cool. I hate overdoing gain because then you start picking up the rest of the house. So I'm
also loud and I tend to be close to my mic.
No, you're perfectly fine. What is that mic, by the way?
Oh, it's an ATR and
2100 or 2005.
I don't know. It's the one that has both ports at the back that's set up like a singer's mic. I don't know exactly what number it is. It's on my Amazon page. I love it. It cuts out echo. I don't have to put it in a hood. I have a mic in a hood that I used to record on, but because I started live streaming so much, I needed something that wasn't vertical. I love the way ATRs sound. Not to get all like, well, you're an Apple person. You're okay talking gear. It picks up.
It'll go off the rails very soon.
I really love talking gear. I like gear. I restrain myself from buying new gear, but I like to buy gear. I like to look at gear. My husband's like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's for the YouTube channel. It's totally fine. Like, it just works out in taxes. It's fine.
Yeah. Write it off.
Business expense. So it picks up the richness in my voice. Some microphones don't pick up the deeper tones in my voice. And so for me, it was really important to have my full voice so I could.
Because the ATR, it's a very flat tonal. So I can tell just by listening that you have a very rich higher end too. So it's a well-rounded voice on that. somebody like anybody bassy or whatever they sound like they're talking in a tin can on the
Can.
ATR to a degree.
Yeah.
That's part of why I've got the Shure, and that's got a warmth to it, and I feel like that goes pretty well.
No, it sounds really good. Yeah.
To the mic. But let me see. Oh, somebody asked, do I have a name for my phone? I do not. I have no idea. Sometimes I think it's cool. I know a lot of people like it, and then sometimes I think it's like gross depending on the name. There's like this guy out there, Derek Von Shake. He's like, "Hey there, Shakers," and I'm like, ugh.
Did he say shankers or shakers?
Or shakers. Like he's it makes my skin crawl. I'm kind of like yeah.
Yeah, it's not for you. The Lawnards named themselves, and I threw it out there. I'm like, what are we at this point? Because it was legit crew.
That's including you. You're a law nerd. Yes, so that's kind of a neat thing. It's like you're part of the tribe, not like they're taking after you. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we're definitely a community, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of. So,
and
I saw I did do that.
Yes, you did. It's fantastic. And actually, when I first heard you, you have an amazing voice. I mean, that was something I noticed just right away. Is like, okay, now I know you use that, and you had to be using that in court.
I didn't consciously, because it took me some therapy and a while to get comfortable with my voice. I got very, very bullied about my voice in junior high and high school. And then I got in trouble with my voice in college because you could hear me from fucking everywhere. So if I was drinking, I was very loud. And so people would be like, "Emily, what are you doing?" And I'd be like, "I'm really not out of control. I'm just very loud." So I was always the kid that got in trouble because the teachers could hear me messing around. And my voice does carry and it has resonance, but also my voice has been fairly deep since I was in junior high. So I got picked on quite a bit for my voice and was literally very hesitant to start my podcast because of that. And it took me some time to be like, you're in your 40s, Emily. Like, this is ridiculous. Stop it. Like, stop worrying about your voice. And then I definitely got a lot more feedback about people are like, "No, I enjoy listening to you. You're very listenable." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Well, here's the irony. I don't know if you've noticed, but every genuine superstar has a very distinct voice. So if somebody can do satire or a parody of somebody, they're going to be a star. You don't have bland voices out there.
True.
Christopher Walken is very distinct sounding. Al Pacino, all of these people, if you consider, have an extremely distinct voice. And sometimes it could even be off or whatever. But you will find that, I don't know if you've gone to a podcast conference or not.
I have not. I want to, but the podcast started in November a year ago. And as I was getting ready to put all my 2020 plans together, I was in London. It launched. I was getting ready for 2020. I went to a concert in Vegas. I came home and the entire world shut down. And I was like, well, I guess Podfest or Pod Nation, one of them is going to be in Nashville this year if it happens. So I'm like, all right, one of them's at the Opry. And so I'm like, any excuse to go to the Opry. I love it.
Gaylord? Oh, okay.
It's either Pod Nation or Podfest. It's one of them.
That damn Gaylord like 5 times.
Well, it's such an easy place to have a conference. So, because it's so big. But podcasting conference is definitely on the list because I love connecting with other podcasters. I love connecting with other YouTubers and creatives. And as I've stepped back from consulting and started doing content for full time, I'm like, who else can we talk to? Let's all chat. I love the community side of content creation for sure.
Well, what's a trip is if you've listened to other podcasters like say Dave Jackson or there's some voices and you just know them. You're walking down a hallway and you hear somebody in a room and you're like, wait a minute. Oh, there's Cridlin. You just go around it's such a weird thing having people whose voices you recognize suddenly they're there, and it's I don't know if you've dealt with parasocial relationships at all. It's kind of a trippy situation, and you'll be on both ends of it. I'm very sure because your popularity, is going through the roof.
I dealt with it before too, because people would come up to me in my local community and be like, "Oh my God, I heard you. You were the DA on my case. I was a juror, or I was a juror in the veneer is like all of the people before they get pulled up to the box and you select 12. And so people remember my voice more than my face. The times I've been recognized out in public before COVID with regard to videos I had done were like, I thought it was you, but I heard you talking. And so I do get recognized for my voice, but that also happens at class reunions and stuff like that. They're like, I hear Emily. She's here. She's here somewhere. There's no doubt when I am present. If I'm talking, generally people will hear me, but I'm also loud. But that's not a good and a bad thing.
I've had Susan C. Bennett on.
Okay.
And she's the original voice of Siri.
Yeah.
She has only been recognized one time in public in the wild.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And speaking of which, it has to be an odd thing for her to hear her voice whenever she's at Delta or whatever.
Absolutely. She's like,
I'm telling
all of the
myself
computer
where
voices.
to go.
I'm the voice of the computer system.
Okay. I don't know about this one, but I've got a request in here. I'm supposed to ask you about the murder purse story. So I'm curious.
Chase, thank you. Good to see you. I talked about on my channel a little bit before I started realizing some of my own habits, that when I would have major milestone cases, I would definitely purchase a reward and or a souvenir. I had 2 very, very heavy fraud cases back to back in 2017. No, 2007. And that's when after I finished those trials, I looked at my husband. I'm like, I'm going to get through these 2 trials. I'm going to get convictions. And then I'm buying myself the first gen iPhone because I didn't want to wait in line for it. And I was like, I'm getting rid of my Trio. I'm getting an iPhone. I cannot wait. So my very first iPhone that's still back on my shelf, I purchased after these 2 particular fraud trials. And then there would be other significant trials. And I'm like, I am buying this particular purse from this trial. So I was joking, like you would sometimes go into the office and they're like, which bag is this? I'm like, oh, you remember this case? This is my murder purse. Like we've gotten through these murder trials. This is the purse. So there was definitely some reward purchasing with regard to trials, because normally you would get back into another one. So you don't really have time to celebrate. So there were these like for me, it was milestone bags because they were easy to take to court. And working in a courthouse, you run through shoes like there's no tomorrow. Some DAs did shoes. And every now and then I'd be like, you're in this disgusting criminal court building where people literally catch like staph infections wearing Louboutins, but you do you.
Wow. Okay. Well, hopefully they are well sealed.
Murder purses. Oh, the infectious disease situation in a courthouse is terrifying. Y'all, if you ever have to go to court or go to jury service, bring your hand sanitizer. I've had friends that have gotten staph. I got exposed to tuberculosis. Courthouses are nasty. COVID might actually make that better. They might actually keep up cleaning
I was going
routines.
to ask you, now. You'd have to be freaked out right now with COVID.
I am very mindful of what my friends are experiencing trying to still work during COVID, and not just the district attorneys, but also the defense attorneys trying to communicate with clients getting locked down because of COVID and the jail populations. It's been quite a lot for the court system to deal with on the criminal side, but also on the civil side, you can't really have public participation in court right now because people just can't come in. It'll be interesting to see how that changes. But now everything's on Zoom. So like if you wanted to call into a hearing, technically you kind of can, which is how one of the Britney Spears conservatorship hearings got like Zoom crashed because the Free Britney movement was all trying to get into the Zoom at the same time. That like crashed the whole system. Speaking of the Zoom thing, did you see that from Judge Sullivan griping that nobody had better record that Zoom call and he better not see any? I think it was Judge Sullivan. And oh dear. So I'm wondering if shall we say the age of tradition and law may be conflicting with the ability of technology going back and forth at this point. Maybe, but for most court proceedings, if you were going to have like a TV station in there, they would have to get all kinds of approvals to record court proceedings. And then there would be certain things they can air, certain things they can't air. So I can understand where judges would be like, you can't record this. This is supposed to take the place of being in person in court, and in person in court, you can't record. Like if you bust your cell phone out in a court, the bailiff will come up and take it from you because there's a privacy and a sanctity of that. It doesn't mean the public can't walk in, but part of that is that you can see who is there. Right. So media has to get, all the permissions and releases to be allowed to record in court. So recording a Zoom call, I think the judges are like, that falls under the same falls under the same thing. You're either here contemporaneously or you're not. So news media can attend a Zoom call and then report on it, but you can't record it and then distribute the recording.
What are your thoughts on that? I don't know if you're familiar with Robert Barnes, but he's one who's like, should be wide open. He loves it. He's like, everybody should be able to look and see what's going on at any trial at any point. And he's a little more suspecting of chicanery and everything else in the courtroom. He likes it open. Now, I can see the other side where I would worry about, let's say, a potential rape victim or a endanger witness. That I would think that you probably need to really look at the technology at that point and say, okay, is there a way to screen or something else? But other than
the potential chilling effects it could have on witness testimony is concerning. When you know things are being recorded, it's different, but the judge can say, okay, cameras out of the courtroom for this particular witness and things like that. There are concerns, but I also, when I look at court proceedings, I come from a prosecutor perspective of I have had witnesses attacked. I have seen things go on in courtrooms. And I have also seen defendants act out in courtrooms that they probably also wouldn't want broadcast in the future if they ever tried to get future work and things like that. You don't necessarily want those videos for them out there either. So in the criminal context, I think there's different considerations than a civil context. Like, do I want to see the entire trial of like Apple versus Epic Games? Yep, sure do. Want to see it all. And, the Toddy Westbrook cases for that matter. But with criminal cases, there's sometimes more sensitivity to that. And there are criminal cases where they close courtrooms for particular things. And I think some of that is appropriate.
Well, actually, I'd love to talk to you about that because I believe you said at one point that you work celebrity stalking and being in the LA metropolitan area, you probably are a little bit closer to,
a lot of celebrities.
Well, yeah, I was just a celebrity and, whatever. I mean, everybody's ultimately human, whether a celebrity or not, they can get in trouble. They can get a DUI and they beat their spouse. There's a million things that celebrities do just like everybody else and sometimes get away with and they shouldn't, but they still do them.
Mm-hmm.
So I am curious on what kind of thing you saw from that, both from there being victims, but also I'm starting to feel a little sympathy for celebrity in the sense of, I mean, to me, an ideal situation, eventually there'll be a question mark, I promise.
No.
An ideal situation would be like, you've heard of Tim Ferriss, right?
Yeah.
That would be about as famous as I'd ever want to be because Tim Ferriss can walk into any convention and be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And he's just a hero and rock star. But then if he like leaves and goes to the convenience store across the street, other than people who are also attending the convention, most people be like, they don't know who the hell he is.
Yeah,
and
contextually famous. Like I can, in the context of what I do, everybody wants to spend time with me. But if I go to Disneyland, people don't know who I am. Yeah, contextually famous, I think is a good deal. So when I was a law clerk at the LA County District Attorney's Office in law school, I worked in CAPOS, which is the Crimes Against Peace Officer. And in that summer, I worked with that district attorney. I worked with stalking and threat assessment a bit, and I worked with arson a bit. So that's where the experience came in that stalking unit. But I also worked at the LAX courthouse during the time that like Coolio was there being prosecuted. Lindsay Lohan was there being prosecuted. I had a other celebrity victim on other cases. So we definitely dealt with celebrity cases and rising celebrity cases. One of my friends prosecuted the bling ring where people were breaking into like Paris Hilton's house when she was traveling and stealing jewelry and flaunting it on, eBay and social media and stuff like that. So I felt in stalking and threat assessment, a lot of it was pre-social media days of taking and distributing pictures of people's houses and points of entry, people breaking into windows to try to get into houses while celebrities were there. But it wasn't like, oh, we're just getting a picture like a celebrity tour bus. It was obsessive letters of, but you're my wife. I don't understand why you're not letting me in the house. And people just obsessed with celebrity in a way that was scary. And so that is where kind of stalking and threat assessment was dealing with very large and kind of frightening cases of people who would break into homes and things like that. So
how about in the courtroom? Because I would worry, obviously about security or just situations coming about even while you're having to handle the case, because that's
Y-
an opportunity. They're kind of
Yes.
trapped in a particular place at a particular time, and people can look that up. Public
Yeah, and
record. Yeah.
the courthouses would be prepared when they knew celebrity was coming in, for court, even if it was somebody coming in on, like, a DUI arraignment, we knew when celebrity was coming in. They had extra sheriffs there. Most celebrity would go into underground parking and come up back elevators, so they weren't, at risk, mostly because the sheriff's department didn't wanna have to deal with them being at risk, except for Lindsay Lohan, who walked into that courthouse like she was running a runway in all white, no undergarments, like walked the runway into the courthouse, cameras everywhere. It's the first picture on my Instagram account is all of the news vans waiting. That was the day I was like, I have to be on Instagram. All of the news vans waiting for Lindsay Lohan to come to court because it was one of the bigger celebrity cases while I was there. And the amount of news media was ridiculous. Trying to get around work that day was ridiculous. But it was also fascinating to like have your workday then relived on like TMZ. It was so wild. Um, and of course, it was just like jewelry theft and stuff. So it wasn't this horribly serious case.
That has
It
to
was
be
interesting.
that has to be surreal, though. Some of it. And I think about Lindsay Lohan, and I'm not trying to throw judgment or shade on her, but she seemed at different points of her career to be um, courting notoriety,
Yes.
if you will. And I have heard, I don't know for sure, but that there are celebrities who actually, if they don't hire paparazzi directly, they damn sure tip them off, that or have somebody tip them off. They will be going here at this time, and they like
It's
to
not
go
just
in.
celebrities that do that. YouTubers in LA do that. Like
Oh
nobody
God.
knows that nobody knows that like Shane Dawson's out getting coffee back when back before COVID and B back when people followed Shane Dawson. But all of a
Mm.
sudden there'd be these, the YouTube channels that are kind of TMZ like would be like, oh, we just bumped into Trisha Paytas on the street. No, you didn't. You didn't just happen to bump into James Charles walking down the street. No, you didn't. You knew he was there. That's part of the game. I was talking about this today with the Haley Page lawsuit. The Haley Page lawsuit is this wedding dress designer who sold the rights to her name in this big lawsuit. She was on Say Yes to the Dress. She's playing the PR game. The company is playing the law game, and she is going to win the PR game. But she's
Sure.
very well placed, very well poised, and it's what people strategically do. The same way James Charles will strategically call and be like, "Oh, I'm going to be here," and they come up on him, and he's wearing his mask, and he's all done. He's like, "Oh, you're here. So weird. Things are great. Yeah." It's part of the PR game.
You missed that.
No.
I just sit there thinking, oh my God. I didn't like LA, just even going through it, but that
I
was
did
part
not
of it.
love living in LA. The only thing I really miss, really are my colleagues, but I still keep in touch with them. Working for yourself as a content creator is not the same as working and the courthouses I worked at, some of them had these long, creepy hallways of offices, but you'd be sitting in your office with 3 other people working, and then you'd yell down the hallway at somebody and be like, "Are you making popcorn? I smell popcorn." And so there were times that working in the courthouse felt like being in a dorm again, and all your
Mm.
colleagues are there. Sometimes you've got people ordering in dinner because everybody's working late on different stuff, and there was definitely a camaraderie that was very team-like, but there were courthouses I worked at that felt like a dorm. Like we had beanbag chairs in our offices, and you'd get done with work for the day and kick off your shoes and like sit there for an hour and decompress with your colleagues and talk case strategy. And that was one of my favorite things about being a DA was my colleagues.
Well, I would think so. And then, you spend all the time together, but now you have kids, your husband, and I'm sure that factored in, and it was less fun to hang out as
It
when you
was,
were
and
single.
it gets busier. And then things like when I was a law clerk for Capos, the district attorney that I worked for, brilliant district attorney, he had police protection on his kids to get them to school every single day. So
Mm.
the police would follow his children from his house to school every single day to make sure they got there safely. Same with the way home. He often had police detail getting him to work because of the types of cases he worked. He was so high risk. In my 20s, I'm like, this is the most badass shit I've ever seen. Like, you've got a gun in your car, one in your back. Like, this is amazing. I absolutely love it, which tells you how distorted the field of
Oh,
view
sure.
can be when you get into that world where you're like, this is the epitome of career success. Like, when do I get my gun? When do I get my first death threat? Like, when do we ride? Do we ride at dawn? I'm riding at dawn. Let's go. And then you become a mom and you're like, oh, nope, hard stop, hard stop. What I don't want is police protection on my house. What I can't do is post a first day of school picture of my children on social media because I can't let anyone know what school they go to. What I'm not going to do is tell you what community I live in or what city I live in
Sure.
if I don't know you. And you become much more guarded about the information you share with people. And so that all led into it. But there was a night when I was pregnant and my oldest was sleeping upstairs and we had police protection on the house. And my husband's like, hey, I know we were just talking about this, but there's like 2 police cruisers in the alley. And I'm like, yeah, about that. And then all night, the different shift changes were like, what happened? They told us we were doing protection on your house, but we don't know what's up. What's the tea? Like, what's tea? What went down? Like, why are people trying to kill you? And so in the last few days, I've received threats on social media and stuff. So I've reached out to some of those officers. I'm like, you're never going to believe this shit. Like, we left the DA's office and still it happens. But
Yeah,
it's
the
just
thing is that it's a very legit thing. I mean, even with YouTube or whatever, you've got the gaming tangent there, and you have swatting.
Yep.
And swatting, like, I'm not sure
Sweating
if
can
you're.
be deadly.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Clemente, but he was talking about that, and I mean,
Swatting is a
using.
huge issue, and the laws have not kept up fast enough. And I don't know, the psychology behind that is so fascinating. It's what I see is it's very much like arsonists. The people who
Mhm.
SWAT behave the way arsonists behave, with they want to be seen for what they've done. And so people generally
Mm.
claim that they swatted because they want the notoriety of, like, I did this and I interrupted your live stream. But it is a misuse of law enforcement. And I saw the chat saying, what is swatting? Do you want to it's your show.
Well, either one. I mean, no, that's perfectly
Let
fine.
the chat know what swatting is.
Okay, swatting is, let's say you and I have a conflict over a game. It came out of the gaming world where people be talking trash on Halo or whatever, and playing each other, and some hacker, and this has literally happened, might come in and say, I'll SWAT them. And what they will do is they will find out the information. This is where doxing comes in, because swatting and doxing go hand in hand.
They have to, yeah.
They know who the person actually is and where they live, and they will call the police and say, like in my case, that I am holding my wife and kids hostage. I have a gun. I've already fired 2 shots. I am volatile. I am drunk, and I'm off my meds. And the cops come in with the SWAT team, literally special weapons and tactics, because
Breaking down the door.
I'm an imminent threat with active hostages, and I'm about to tip in their mind.
Yep.
And what happens is, and this happened, I believe, is in Wichita, where they didn't even get the right address, and it was across the street. But anyway, some guy comes out and he gets shot down by the cops because they're so on edge, and with the hair trigger. And you can't completely blame the cops. I mean, this is very much a crime because
Right.
they are being psychologically set up to be right there, at that hair trigger, to where they're absolutely going to hit people.
And they deal with those circumstances regularly. They deal with hostage situations.
Mhm.
They deal with situations gone bad. They deal with things that you can't generally imagine. So they are on edge. I was a DA in Long Beach with a murder for hire case, and in the prosecution of the hit person and the person who hired them, the police had gotten to the house. The woman said, let me go and put my dogs away. They're going nuts. They were going nuts because the hitman was in her home while the police were at the front door, and she was killed in her house while the police were standing at the door.
Oh my
So
God.
when police see things like that and experience that in their career, those things are taken very, very seriously, which is why swatting is so incredible and illegal. But the reason people do it is if you're streaming, to have it on stream. Like, the goal of swatting is to have the SWAT team like bust in while you are on stream and see kind of the fruits of your efforts, the same way
And they
arsonists want to
laugh
see their
in
fires on the
frame.
news. Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
it's
And they record it and reshare it. And it is absolutely illegal, but it's also, it takes some time to track it back, and it can be very, very damaging, and it's expensive. But if you get caught swatting, you have to do like the time, and you get charged the money. But it's an issue
good.
because police can't always parse what's a real threat and what's not a real threat until they investigate, because these things happen. I mean, the story that I shared was not unique.
Mhm.
And police have that in their kind of departmental collective memory. And that's why they make decisions that they make, because they are really there to try to protect and serve. So that's why swatting.
Domestics too are powder kegs. I mean, every
Yes.
cop hates domestics
Yes.
because, I mean, what is it?
Yes.
90% of all killings are from a significant other.
Yes.
I mean, it is such a horrible situation. And domestics are also bad because a cop may go in and the husband is beating the wife. They handcuff the husband, and all of a sudden the wife is smashing their head with a pan. It's such a terrible situation.
It's a volatile situation, because if you are going to be volatile with somebody that you love and care about, there's nothing that's going to stop you from being volatile with a stranger. So you're walking into some of the most emotionally charged circumstances that you're going to walk into. And hostage situations being the same. When I was in Inglewood, I had a 3-way gone wrong. And somebody ended up with scissors in their stomach and their back. And it was a very odd police report to read. I was like, what is happening here?
Oh my God.
What is happening? But
Ouch.
relational violence is it's a very difficult thing to parse. And then it's a difficult thing to prosecute, because people who haven't been in relationships that fit that pattern don't understand the psychological side of that pattern, and are like, I don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. Well, because it's a different kind of dysfunction that you are not experienced with. And that is a whole tangent that we could go down. But we're seeing that. I've covered the Shia LaBeouf. I get corrected all the time on how to say his last name. I still don't know how to pronounce his last name, but FKA Twigs filed a civil suit against him regarding relational violence. And then, of course, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case.
Yeah, that one, I don't know. I feel there's reasons to dig deeper into that situation.
There are the two different cases read very differently. Again, they are all court allegations, but these are continuing to go forward. The UK, I think the American audience has a hard time understanding the UK court system. They're like, wait, the judge just decides who's telling the truth? Yep, that's how that worked.
Yeah,
and
there's
people
problems
disagree with how the judge did it. There are problems with that judge.
Like he's connected to her.
He is, which is wild.
And I'm thinking
the whole thing's wild.
That would get him, potentially even knocked off the bench here if he got caught out with all that.
They would have recused themselves here. The judge would have been like, no.
Consequences.
Yeah, I don't know if any judge would choose not to recuse themselves in a celebrity case where they could get flamed on it. They would be like, I'm not touching this. Most judges are overly cautious when it comes to recusing themselves. And I've had judges make disclosures in cases that, like, if you're involved in a lemon law case with Ford, a judge will be like, I have stock in Ford as a part of my retirement stock portfolio. If the parties are not comfortable with that, I will recuse myself, but it will not impair my judgment. I do a lot of these cases. So judges are very clear to let you know if a judge has stock in Apple and they get an Apple, Apple versus Epic Games or whatever it is, they're going to disclose that. And then the parties can say, we're not comfortable with it. And that's how that plays out here. It's different in the UK.
Speaking of that, are you planning to cover Apple v. Epics?
Mm-hmm.
That's a weird case because
it's weird.
Both sides are assholes. I'm sorry.
Right. That makes it so interesting because it's easy to talk about without like picking sides crazily. So there's some cases on my list that as other shit keeps happening, keep getting pushed down my list because those cases are moving slower. I never thought that the Tati Westbrook cases would have so much shit happen in them. And my audience is like, we're here. Like, we've mounted up for this case.
Well, you're
We
in
are
the case
going
now.
to the end. I mean, I'm not in it, but yes,
you kind of are.
I'm getting
Yeah, as soon as
dragged
you're
for it.
cited in court documents, you're in the case.
My
It's
name wasn't
weird.
in there, just my face.
Well, I don't know. I mean, from what I've seen, and yeah, I planned to go to it. See, I'm going to hold everybody here. I got to get the YouTube times, and we wait to talk about the case.
We'll talk about it. We will.
Perfect. But on that case, I'm going to ask you to kind of break it down for me, because from what I see is a weird situation where you have a extremely big YouTuber going after, relatively speaking, a small YouTuber.
Yep.
Now, oddly, normally that would be a David v. Goliath situation, and most people would be rooting for the small YouTuber, saying, "Hey, you jerk, you Shane Dawson, you fill in the, whatever." And it's not Shane Dawson. I'm just throwing out big names, not accusing. But for a big one to go after a little one, but everybody, again,
the weight of
everybody's too happy. The masses seem to be not friendly or happy with the little YouTuber. That's surprising. And nobody was really happy with the big YouTuber from what I saw either, because they kind of went after another YouTuber and then took it back, or some weirdness. Now, the little YouTuber seems to be going after you, who is an even littler YouTuber.
Exactly.
That'll be taken care of soon. But at the moment, it's an odd situation. So what happened? Help me out.
So I covered the Tati Westbrook business partner lawsuit first. Tati Westbrook was sued by her business partner. The complaint is deliciously full of tea. Again, complaints are allegations. They are not necessarily full of facts. They are facts as seen by the party in a context of making that particular party look best. So that lawsuit starts with, "This is a lawsuit about the defendant's greed." Like, the first sentence is like, "Come to the story and let me tell you about this YouTuber who was super greedy and had, said she was friends with all these people and then didn't fulfill her business obligations. And I was cut out of the thing. And I was owed."
But those are fun to read, right?
So fun to read. So fun to read. And so that's kind of where that started. KJ of the Without a Crystal Ball channel broke that story. She has said it all over the internet. She sent that story to every newspaper outlet she could find, ETV, E-News, all the things. She rode to get that story out there and to get credit for breaking that story. Mm-hmm. What I didn't know, I was unaware of her channel at the time. I was unaware of who she was at the time. I was unaware that she was claiming credit for the story at the time. And then I saw channels making videos that she was coming after them because they talked about the lawsuit that's a public document without giving her credit for the public document.
Is she a journalist?
No.
Okay. Wait.
She says she is.
I was going to say, I kind of get the vibe like she's claiming to be, but okay.
Sometimes she says she is. Sometimes she says she isn't. The problem with the business partner suit is she reported it, but she did not put the documents up, and she misreported facts in the documents. So though you are allowed to report on public records, what you cannot do is say that they say shit that they don't say. So she extrapolated things into there, and it seemed to me that that was the final straw for the Westbrooks. What I didn't know at the time is that the Westbrooks had sent this YouTuber 4 cease and desists over 18 months based on statements she had been saying about them. So it seemed that this business partner lawsuit was the straw that broke the camel's back. From my perspective, there are things in the business partner lawsuit credited to online sources that line up with some of the alleged defamatory statements that Without a Crystal Ball made. So it looks like the business partner may have relied on some of the things that Without a Crystal Ball said in their complaint against the Westbrooks, saying, see, they're this, they're this, they're this. So then, like a week later, this other lawsuit drops with Tati suing this channel. And I'm like, what? And then I read the defamatory statements. I'm like, wait a second. These statements line up with what's in that lawsuit. This is fascinating. And then all hell popped off. Things were getting deleted off of the internet. Tweets were being removed. And the commentary community was like watching it happen and calling it out. So then there was a motion to preserve evidence, or a motion to not delete your shit, that was full of screenshots. And that's really where the tea of that lawsuit started. It was like, oh, look at what happened. Normally you get a complaint, you read the complaint, and then you wait for an answer to the complaint. But there was context on social media before. And then that took us into everyone's focus being back on her behavior online, because now there's this motion to preserve evidence, which is an obligation you have in a civil suit. We saw the Enron case. We know how that goes. So then there was KJ's motion to dismiss, and the motion to dismiss got the law tube in a whole mess, because
that's where you met everybody, right?
That's where I met everybody, with the motion to dismiss, because all the lawyers were like, collectively, WTF.
Except for Nate, he was trying to stand by her because
he tried.
Nate is a friend of hers, and that's the weird one, because Nate has this back history too, that she was a co-host on a show that has another crazy lawsuit with people seem to be very willing to cut off their nose to spite their face. I don't know why.
I don't either. And I am familiar that there is a circumstance there. I've not dove into what that is there, because I don't care about the drama surrounding that person. I have been trying to just keep moving. But yes, Nate was friendly with her. Nate had me on his channel and got a DM saying goodbye. So they are no longer friends, which was odd to me as well. I'm like, but Nate was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, and trying to, from my perspective, trying to almost give some context around that and read into that document. But I then saw, as we had a panel on my channel about it, as we got into it, he's like, no, I agree, the law is not there. And then the motions have continued. It's gotten more contentious. Toddy Westbrook has not been public at all, and she hasn't been since the Breaking My Silence video. The defendant's position on the case seems to be, right, but these other people did shit too. And that seems to be their position of the case, based on everything I've seen filed, is right, but Toddy said that James or that J-Star and Shane Dawson were the cause of her problem, so why am I being sued? Why isn't she suing them? And that seems to be kind of the narrative around the defense's position of the case. The thing in defamation is that defamation can be done by multiple people. Like, you can be defamed by 3 different people causing damages.
Is that like speeding? You know, just because 5 others are speeding doesn't mean you weren't speeding and you didn't break the law.
And then my perspective on this case, reading it and having followed that drama from the Bi Sister video all the way through, the whole Bi Sister scenario has nothing to do with James Westbrook and has nothing to do with Halo Beauty, the company. And some of the statements that are the strongest case, I think, for Toddy Westbrook are the statements with regard to James Westbrook. So all of the defamatory statements could get tossed with regard to Toddy. Like, she's a public figure. Yes, you said she had this criminal background, but she doesn't. Like, there weren't enough damages. But with regard to James Westbrook, I think there's a stronger case. And with regard to the company, I think there's a stronger case than there is to Tati herself. So trying to say, well, Bi Sister Toddy wrecked herself. It's like, even if Toddy wrecked herself and her reputation with Bi Sister, that has nothing to do with her husband and Halo Beauty. Because Halo Beauty did very well after Bi Sister, which is that, like, does scandal pay kind of a conversation. So then I don't know what turned the ire on me. I think
you seem to be really, I mean, I don't know. It's very weird. I don't know if she dislikes Toddy or you more at this point, from the vibe I'm getting.
I don't know either. From the statements that have been sent to me, the screenshots that have been sent to me, and the videos that have been sent to me, there's been a lot of comments made that I am commenting on the case unfairly because I haven't talked to her about the case. I haven't talked to anyone in the case because I'm not talking to the parties in a case. I read court documents, and then I extrapolate from those court documents with my own experience, saying, it's odd that we're arguing it this way. It's odd that this is your position on the case. It's odd that you're using 45-line paper when the court standing order says 26. Like, that's what it is. That's just,
but it's a public document, right?
Yeah, they're all public documents.
I mean, and even I'm not a lawyer. I could sit there and read it online, and if I'm reading the document and representing it truthfully, or trying to,
just think, this document says this is what I think. Like, ooh, that's shady. Ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, these allegations are a lot. And a lot of channels are doing that. What I think part of it is that a few weeks back, the attorney on the case, Michael Saltz, we call him Saltsy on our channel because he is sassy in his
footnotes. A perfect name, right?
it just happened. And I was like, it's perfect. It was actually a super chat. Somebody said motion to call him Saltsy. And I was like, yes, motion granted. I bought Apple and everything. We granted the motion. Our channel calls him Saltsy. So there was a tweet a while back where somebody was accusing, or a chain of people were accusing KJ of having purchased subscribers. And the conversation was coming up around this jurisdictional argument. Jurisdiction being, hey, the court in Washington can't be the boss of you because you're in Minnesota. So does the court get to be the boss of you in Washington? And some of that has to do with contacts with the state and things like that. So this issue of subscribers came up. And then there were conflicting statements and signed declarations about subscribers. And so people were saying, well, that makes sense if she has purchased subscribers. What I read into that was that some people were saying maybe she has less contacts in the state because she bought subscribers. So those would be international. And so she doesn't have as many contacts in Washington. And there was lots of speculation. Salty asked a question about purchase subscribers. Like, is there evidence of that? Or is this why her channel is getting these level views and Emily D. Baker's channel with this many subs is getting these many views? So
ouch. Okay, so now that makes sense. It hit her where it really hurt.
He threw shade, which again, not unethical. He was asking a question. Is this why this channel with these many subs looks this way? And this channel with, at the time, half the subs looks this way? It's a legit question, but also it throws shade because she had already come after me a couple times on the internet. So once again, in law, you can have the PR side of it and the law side of it. And he definitely works within both sides of that from what I've seen on social media. He is very well aware of the PR side of this case and the law side of this case.
He's like a Garagos or that type, right?
Well, I've met Garagos a couple of times. I find Salty to be more entertaining.
Or Gloria Allred.
No shade, Mark Garagos, but there's a different kind of level there, and I do find it entertaining. And so we do tweet back and forth on occasion. He's also a former deputy district attorney, so there's a kind of awareness of the way he probably does things for me. So it's easier for me to be like, oh, if his thought process is similar to my thought process, this is where this is going. He also casually drops in a footnote that he reps Ryan's toy review and stuff like that. I'm like, weird flex, but okay. We love that on our channel. Like, flexing who else you represent in a footnote is kind of genius. And I was,
well, he's going to get, I mean, other business, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
You'll hire him, you know, hey, come on.
I am sure that if he's repping Toddy Westbrook and Ryan's toy review and he has made it known that he reps Ringo Starr, I know that there will be other YouTubers within that group of people he represents, but you don't know it because they're not in lawsuits.
Well, maybe that's why. Maybe
so then he and I got lumped together in all of the threats that have been going on Twitter in the last few days. It's always at him and at me at the same time. People have attempted to hack my accounts at the same time they've attempted to hack his accounts.
Two-factor, everybody. Two-factor.
All the two-factor.
I'm not kidding.
So then we've kind of gotten thrown together in the spray of hatred towards the two of us, which is why I think I ended up in this filing. I also, just my personal opinion, think that she doesn't like me covering the case and doesn't like that my channel is growing and that we talk about this case.
But she's helping you grow. This is what I love is it's like
my Twitter, every time she goes after me on Twitter, every time she talks about me on Twitter, my Twitter numbers jump. It's very strange. And every time she goes after me in a really aggressive way, because on my channel, we're not judging. We're not casting dispersions. We're not here to drag people. We are here to go through these lawsuits and talk about them and talk about what we see. But then every time she lashes after me, the law nerds are like, no, this is not what it is. And other channels make videos about her going after me. She has a history, from what I've seen, of doing this to other people other than Toddy Westbrook. So there was already this group of people that were regularly calling her out online. And so when this lawsuit popped off and she started doing things on social regarding it, that group was like, oh, no, you don't. So there's already this group that had their attention on her. And that's got to be very stressful. There are parody Twitter accounts, there are subreddits, there are Facebook groups of people that just don't like the way that she goes after people. and
She must
they
be
are now
quoting it though. I
invested.
mean, she keeps
She
doing
does.
it.
She
And
does.
I've got one hypothetical question. Let's say that you absolutely despised her and you were mocking her every turn, everything else. That's still not illegal, is it?
No, it's totally fair.
So I
I
mean,
mean,
that is the very definition of well, fair use. Like if you take part of her video and you mock the holy shit out of it, that's
absolutely.
because that's critique. So
Right. And I don't have to be unbiased. I could absolutely go on my channel and be like, I want Toddy Westbrook to win this thing, blah, blah, blah. I could absolutely do that. For me, I have a internal conflict with this case because it'll be very interesting to see jurisdiction. And are we now allowing things that happened on YouTube to be pulled from one state to another state? What are the factors the court considers to be enough? If you're talking about someone in another state, these are big questions.
Yeah, and I wanted to actually go over that real quickly, and I have a really legit
A
question here that
legit
I think,
question.
which is kind of nice. But on that note, and I know Nick Riquetas brought it up a little bit. There are some troubling aspects of if Toddy wins for creators.
I think it depends on how she wins and the jurisdiction arguments. So here's what I'm seeing with the jurisdiction arguments. We've gone from directing the content at Washington, knowing that Toddy Westbrook was in Washington, to now potentially having agents in Washington helping spread defamatory material. If the court's like, no, there were agents in Washington, there's now a declaration from a subscriber that was a ride or die. My channel knows.
Well, what's an agent?
Well,
Is somebody retweeting you? Is that an agent?
Well, somebody retweeting you, mass flagging accounts, and saying, no, she asked me to do things on her behalf to defend her and her company reputation. So she asked me to attack other accounts that were attacking her. She asked me to help kind of distribute. And so it's beyond just retweeting someone. It was a direct, she says it was a direct ask to do things on her behalf. So that becomes an agent in the state. So if the court says, oh, this is an agent in the state and these are enough contexts in the state, then we'll see. If the court just says, no, directing the statements at a person that lives in a state is enough, that's a whole different situation that YouTube is going to have to then address in terms of use, saying, you know what? All the fuckery that happens in the US, you all have to bring it in California. If there's fuckery amongst each other, bring it in California. I don't know if they could do that, because if you defame someone in their state, just like if you show up in their state,
it goes federal, right? I mean, you can't go federal because
and that's what it's doing. Exactly. And that's why it's in federal court. But if she wins on the defamatory stuff, it will definitely give some context around what you can and cannot say. You can get on your YouTube channel and say someone's an asshole, that you hate them, all those things. You can't get on there and say they have this criminal rap sheet, they've been convicted of these crimes, they are a predator, all of those types of things.
So specificity is where you get into trouble. If you say somebody is a creep, that's not really saying anything. But if you say they're a pedophile, that's an actual charge.
Correct. And so what's a creep? What's an asshole? What's somebody acting like a dick? Like, what are those things? Like, you're not saying they're literally, genitalia, right? So there's a difference between besmirching someone and then attacking their character or business relationships. So going on your channel and saying any brand that works with them, you guys need to go and flag that brand and say that they can't work with them because I think they're an asshole. That becomes interference in business relationships. Saying I no longer support.
That's another charge though, besides defamation. That's actually
besides defamation.
Contractual interference or something.
Tortious interference with contractual relationships. Yep. But there's ways that this stuff falls into these zones, and the statements I see in the complaint with regard to this case particularly are the things that misrepresent James Westbrook's criminal history, the insinuations that he killed his mom and took her off of oxygen for money. Those types of insinuations have taken complaints or court records and then added layers on them. The easiest one is like, oh, the business partner said he used his banking relationships in the lawsuit. The business partner lawsuit. I used my business relationships. They didn't have business relationships. She went on her channel and said, when they started Halo, they were broke. They didn't have bank accounts. They didn't have this.
It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. So words matter. And after 18 months of cease and desists, after her on video, and the clips are all over the internet, her on video going, they're never going to sue me. She was calling out the Westbrooks repeatedly and saying, why should I stop? And they were like, this is enough. So when she misreported the business partner suit, I think that's when they're like, this has to stop, because now it's impacting or could impact this other litigation. And then her own behavior, in my opinion, is what kind of turned the tide of public opinion with regard to Toddy Westbrook vis-a-vis her.
Well, to wrap this up on a perfect note, I know you've heard of them before because you've been on with Nick Rekieta, but the dragonstreasure.com sells tea. And if you guys want to get some tea, that's really good tea. By the way, I got some. I did try it. I'm not really a big tea drinker, but I'm going to start now. I enjoyed it. They have this thing called an ingenious teapot. Thank God that you can buy. And
sounds fantastic.
Well, it's that loose tea, which is like really fiddly, and that
you definitely need.
It's just too pompous for me. I can't handle that type of thing. So, that basically is a wonderful thing to consider investing. But you can just dump in the tea in it. It's very simple. You take a teapot, and it's simple enough for even me. What's really sad is I still looked up for a video on how to run it or how to work it. But it's literally, you fill it with the hot water, you let it sit there for the timer, and that's what you have an Apple Watch for a timer, a very expensive timer. And then you set it right on the cup when it's done, and it just drains into the cup.
Oh, cool.
And all the tea stays in the top. So my wife compares it to like a fat separator, which is really gross sounding if you consider it. But tea's good, fat bad. You'll like the tea, I promise. Anyway, if you guys are interested, thedragonstreasure.com. Use the coupon code unstructured. You get 10% off, and I get a little kickback too. Very, very nice. So thank everybody. I see
Dragon's Treasure in the chat as well, which is fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, he got yelled at by Nightbot. I'm like, yeah, great. Everybody. Nightbot's pissing everybody off. So it's consistent.
Dragon's Treasure needs some legal tea. We need a legal tea.
Definitely. You never know. He may be contacting you.
We need legal tea because it's hot. There's going to definitely, celebrities are always kind of in lawsuits, which is why I do cover the news stuff, but also the pop culture stuff. I find that people learn through the stories and they're already invested in kind of the players in the story. And it takes the rancor of kind of politics and news out of it, because that has been so divisive lately. We really enjoy just being like, what is Erica Girardi posting on Instagram now? And is it insensitive? Is it not? Like, what's happening? And that's been really fun.
Well, perfect. Now, as a last question, I told you there's a legit question here. And
yep.
Eva is a regular, and she's actually a member of the channel. But as a former prosecutor, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding the public has about how the law works?
That is a really thoughtful and deep question, both criminal and civil. I think the largest misconception is that people think it moves a lot faster based on TV and movies. The law moves very, very slowly. And the law evolves very, very slowly. So I think that's absolutely where the big misconceptions are about how quickly law should work or can work.
All right. Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you, Tamara.
And thank you, Uncovering.
Thank you, Uncovering. Good to see you.
That is awesome. Now, what I love is I swear I could go for another 2 or 3 hours.
We could.
We're barely scratching the surface. So
I know
hopefully that means that I can have you back. Because we haven't finished the conversation. And I like to put different people together, like I'll have you with Nate or Viva or whatever. It's just super cool to get different opinions. And I really, really love what you're doing. And you're a lot of fun.
I love it too.
Your TED Talk needs to get the numbers up because that's awesome. I love the idea of finding yourself later in life. And I think a lot of your audience it has to resonate too. Because I have guests on, that's what I do. Somebody asked kind of what I am. I'm a nobody who's just very curious about different people.
I wouldn't put yourself as a nobody. Facilitating conversations is a skill. No, you laugh, but facilitating interesting and deep conversation is absolutely a skill. And allowing space for those conversations to happen is absolutely something that's needed and valuable. There aren't enough actual conversations on the internet. It's the thing I enjoyed. I don't always appreciate Joe Rogan. My followers know that I have kind of mixed feelings sometimes, but he opens up the space to have engaged conversations. I'm sad that that's not on YouTube anymore, and I think it's kind of left space for others to have engaged and long form conversations that kind of breach a variety of topics and talk about the way different people see the world.
Yes, and that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm actually living vicariously through you, and living vicariously through different people. Like, let me see, the Vic. No, I have not. Mike Mysterio. I'm not. That's a Nick Rekieta case, I believe, that he spent time on. I don't know. I have different people. Like, one of my favorite guests is Jack Barsky, and I love it when I can go out there with somebody. He's a KGB spy, and
Very cool.
he is the longest successful mole. He lived in the United States for 16 years before he was discovered. And amazing guy. Also, he came here in like 79 and he quit. By the time they caught him, he had already not been a spy for years. He managed to break away from the Soviet Union by saying he had AIDS. And they're like, okay, we'll give your retirement to your family and move on. Now, the weird part is that he has an identity crisis in some ways, because he literally had wife and kids in Germany, wife and kids here, Eastern Germany.
Yeah.
And he talked about that with me. And I love getting into the depth of that. Who can talk to him? What kind of, psychologist or psychiatrist can really comprehend or understand to have a split identity based on patriotism? Because I consider him a patriot. He just happened to be of another country. Anyway, so that's the kind of stuff that I really dig, and I love having fun with you. You're right in the same crowd. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You, and thank your law nerds. Yeah, they do ride at dawn and are awesome. And
they are. The law nerds blow me away consistently. It's the thing I really love most about getting to do content, is getting to have that community. But I was on Instagram Live and new court documents dropped, and I was like, law nerds, we were riding this evening. We had over 7,000 people on a live chat that I literally threw up 15 minutes before we chatted. Like, the law nerds were like, yes, we do. Yes, we do. We ride right now. And like, on a night I don't normally go live on, literally a moderators mount up. And it's,
you just did that last night, right?
Was it last night? Monday night? I think it was Monday night. I don't know. The days run together. It's Wednesday.
Yeah,
Monday night. That was Monday night.
Well, I have this weird thing where I put in 10 to 12 hours minimum studying everybody I have on. So it's like, I've been listening to you and everything else.
I give you plenty of content for it, because there are hours and hours and hours of content.
Which I love. I mean, it is fantastic. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tracy.
And law nerds, Emily, hopefully you'll come back and ride together.
Always happy to have a conversation. Thanks, guys.